I'm Jana, the little sister.
And I'm Jeff, her big brother. Welcome to Sibling Rivalry, a podcast about our favorite sport, baseball.
This week on Sibling Rivalry Baseball, we delve into the history of the Major League Baseball amateur draft and look at this year's Dodgers and Angels selection.
We also climb into the baseball time machine to find the real inspiration for the movie, The Natural. Now it's time for a quick look at the SRBB headline.
The Negroes League Museum in Kansas City reopened this week for the first time since March 14th.
A 97-year-old New Jersey man passed away in March, leaving behind a pristine baseball card collection, including 6 signed 1933 Babe Ruth cards.
The MLPA rejected the latest offer from the MLB. The Players Union have told MLB to let them know when and where the baseball season will start.
The Detroit Tigers take Spencer Torkelson of Arizona State University as the overall number 1 pick in this year's shortened 2020 draft. And that's it for this week's SRBB headlines. Remember, you can find those and previous week's headlines at siblingrivalrybb.com. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to our podcast. While baseball has the longest history as a professional sport, dating back to 1871, they have the shortest draft history. The NFL has the oldest draft, starting in 1936, followed by basketball in 1947. Hockey showed up in 1963, and then baseball 2 years later in 1965. It started out with 3 separate drafts: the June draft, which continues to this day. There were also an August and a January draft that were eventually discontinued. Also, it is the only in-season draft. Rick Monday, mostly known for saving an American flag that was about to be burned at Dodger Stadium, also has the distinction of being the first pick ever in the MLB draft. He was selected by the Kansas City A's in that 1965 draft.
Going through, I was looking, MLB had kind of a draft, if you want to call it that, dating back to 1921, where they would assign minor league players to teams. But what was happening is the wealthier teams like the New York Yankees and the St. Louis Cardinals, they were signing all of the talent, and the poorer clubs were left with some less desirable prospects. In 1947, Major League Baseball implemented the bonus rule, which was a restriction aimed at reducing player salaries, as well as keeping wealthier teams from monopolizing the player market. And it's interesting because this also, what was happening in the Major League Baseball draft, I put quotes around draft, since it was just assigning minor league players to a team, was even talked about in Congress as bad business.
Wow, and it continues till today.
Yes.
This is one thing, the reading about more of the history of the draft has really shown me why baseball has the business problems that they seem to have, because there's just so many moving parts. It's so convoluted. As we were talking about there used to be 3 sections of the draft. The June draft, which is what has always been. There were certain qualifications for the June draft. That was mostly for high school graduates and college seniors. August were for those who were playing in the summer leagues. And then you had the January draft were for people who were for like high school and college that graduated in the winter. So there's all those moving parts. And then there's Rule 4 draft, Rule 5 draft, the competitive balance draft picks. Those are all set up by the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement. The rules about the draft in general are all in there, but how the competitive balance draft picks fall in. And then, unlike other sports, you can't trade regular draft picks in the major leagues. So when you trade a player, the NBA is a good one for it. We're going to trade this player and our 3rd draft pick.
You do see that happen a lot.
They can't do that with the regular draft picks, but with the competitive balance draft picks, those can be traded. That's how the Dodgers got a competitive balance draft pick. When they traded Kenta Maeda to Minnesota, part of the return was Gratterall, and their pick. And I read all that and was like, oh, hey, maybe I'll bring that up and talk about, how that works. And then when I read it through it, I got dizzy and passed out and just decided, if you want to know more about competitive balanced draft picks, look it up.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're recovered and that you're okay after reading about that. Yeah, going back, this is interesting. Going back to the bonus rule that I had mentioned, that was in 1947. There were some accusations that teams were signing players to smaller bonuses only to supplement them with under-the-table payments. And in one famous incident, the Kansas City Athletics signed Clete Boyer and kept him on their roster for 2 years, and then traded him to the Yankees just as he became eligible to be sent to the minor leagues. Other clubs accused the Yankees of using the Athletics as a de facto farm team, and the A's later admitted to signing Boyer on their behalf.
Yeah, see, things like that. There's shady underdealings go on everywhere.
This was interesting too, because it deals with the Los Angeles Angels, that there was a bidding war for Rick Reichart for the outrageous bonus of $200,000.
Wow.
And because of that led to the draft. So we're going to blame it on Rick Reichart.
I believe, yeah, that's who's going to get blamed for it. It's not.
Right. For the craziness of the draft and bonus compensation and all that stuff.
And so,
yeah,
like
it does
you
make
said,
you dizzy.
Like you said, all of those, they had things in place, but the richer teams could send out more scouts. They could find more players. They signed more. Maybe that's what led to the Yankees having not only 27 championships, but they also have 27 Hall of Famers, the most of any team.
Yeah, crazy to think about that. And it all came from the starting in 1921, where they were just assigning minor league players to teams, and whoever had the most money wins. Which you would think they went to Congress. They had a whole congressional hearing about this, and it still wasn't solved.
No.
But that's not really a surprise.
No. The baseball draft, I think at the beginning, it just went on until they got tired of picking there in 1965 and reading about how it all worked. Specifically, as I read a story about, once again, Nolan Ryan, but they were talking about where he was in the draft, somebody went back and actually did reset the whole thing and organized it. He wasn't technically drafted in the 12th round and wasn't the 200 and some odd pick. He was more like the 10th round and the 100 and something pick. But because of the way that they did it, and they said that may not even be completely correct because it was weird how it was all documented.
I'm wondering if whoever was recording during the draft, because they just kept picking until, there didn't seem to be any end in sight. Maybe the recorder got tired and they just had Nolan Ryan at a different spot, and really he was the 10th round, or
maybe they had 3 or 4 people doing it and they didn't put it all back together, so they're just reading off of 10 different sets of notes.
They didn't collaborate.
The whole thing, when I read about it, that part alone, that probably helped start getting me dizzy just reading it. Because the way they set it up, there was a point where certain rounds were based on what your AA team did. And then there was certain rounds based on what your single A team did. So if your single A, and some teams have more than one, at that point, they had more than one single A team. They may have even had more than one AA team. And so they would get picks for all of those teams. So normally, as we see it now, 1 pick per team per round. That was part of the thing, was that some of those rounds in the 8th round, they just picked until they just decided that they were done picking for the 8th round. And then they said, okay, now it's the 9th round. They did the same thing. They just did what they wanted to do. They didn't have a structure per se.
It's almost like they had a bunch of names in a hat and they just pulled names out.
Right.
So this is the first round hat. And Rick Monday, he was the first name pulled.
With the exception of this year, normally it's about 40 rounds. There have been some that are longer. when we compare those to the other sports, the NFL, how many rounds does the NFL have? They're like 7 max. They only pick 250 some odd people. The NHL also 7 rounds. And the NBA only does 2 rounds. And they have similar numbers of teams. They've just said this is all we're going to take. And
Well, the
then
big
baseball's
difference,
40 rounds.
yeah. Well, and the big difference too between the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL is those draft picks are expected to make immediate impacts on the team that they've been drafted to. Whereas when you're drafted in the Major League Baseball draft, you're going to go to the minors and you're going to play at the minor league level for a year, 2 years, 3, depending on how good you are. Sometimes we
Right.
see guys that come out and they came from, they were so good in AA, maybe they played a game in AAA and they were called up. I think Gavin Lux fits into that description where he played mainly with the Tulsa Drillers, did play a little bit with Oklahoma City, but he still was in the minor leagues for a little while, at least I think 2 years or maybe a year.
Ken Griffey Jr.
So
is another one that I remember seeing him play in San Bernardino. The San Bernardino Spirit at the time were the single A club for the Mariners, and they sent him somewhere else. He came and played a fair amount of time with the Spirit, and then went off, did a little bit of double A, a little bit of triple A, and was with the team called up that same season. So he had a short time in the minors. There's not many players that go directly into the NBA or the NFL. No, Major League Baseball, there's not a lot of players that go directly, get drafted, and then go directly to the club that drafted them or directly to the majors. Usually, like you said, it's a 3 to 5 year process for a lot of these guys. It's funny as we look at the MLB draft and the history of it, up until Ken Griffey Jr., no number 1 picks had made it to the Hall of Fame. The first player to be drafted to make the Hall of Fame was Johnny Bench. He was drafted in that 1965 draft, inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1989. He was the first one to do it. Then Junior finally came along and broke that streak of no number 1 picks. And then Chipper Jones was a number 1 pick. He ends up in there. Harold Baines, who just recently was inducted, he was a number 1 pick in 1977. Junior in 1987, and then Chipper Jones in 1990.
This is an interesting stat. The entire 2007 first round, so 64 players, totaled 1 inning of Major League playing time as of the end of the 08 season. And as of the 2009 season, the vast majority of the 2008 first rounders were still assigned to minor league organizations. In contrast, every first round pick in the 2008 NFL draft had played in the league by the end of the 2008 season. And
that
then going
makes complete sense because, like you said earlier, they're drafted not only for future, but they're drafted for immediate impact as well in both the NBA and the NFL. College is their minor league system per se. I didn't look at anything with the NHL, but the NHL has minor league teams that they have agreements with. So I don't know when they draft if those players are being assigned to these minor league hockey teams or if some of them may make it directly to the NHL. They're closer to baseball as far as their organizational structures on player development, where like you said, NFL, how many of those guys are drafted? And when you compare the MLB draft class to the NFL draft class or the NBA draft class, there's a lot of guys in the MLB that they're still playing, but they're playing at lower levels.
Yeah, and the majority of players that go in the first round will never see in Major League. I think that's why the NFL draft, people get, and even the NBA, but especially NFL, people get really excited because, like you said, the universities are the de facto minor league for the NFL. So the fans already, if they follow college football, which if they're a football fan, I'm sure they probably do, they already follow these guys and are either hoping for them to be on their team or, whatever the case may be. So they know them. Whereas with the Major League Baseball draft, you get excited because you're like, oh, this he's going to be great. He's a great prospect. But then once the season starts, or while the season is still, because this is happening in June, so the season it's going on, we'd say, you forget their names unless they're, burning it up in the minor leagues. Otherwise, you're not going to hear about them.
Right. Up until I think it was in 2009 with the MLB network, they started trying to be a little more like the NBA, NFL, watch pieces here and there, but I never really ever paid attention to the draft. I read about it later. Oh, you have these players, and then expect in a couple of years, maybe, okay, we'll see them. Unless, like you said, there's something about them that they're super excited about. They're that King Griffey Jr. type player, one of those guys. When you think about it, in 2009, MLB Network, they couldn't get anybody to come to the studios and sit there during the draft. You know how like they do with the NBA or in the NFL where they've got a green room and the players are in the back waiting and they get called and they only invite certain higher projected draft picks and they come up and they get their jersey and everything. They only got one player to show up in 2009. You know who that was?
Mike Trout.
Yep. Mike Trout. And he sat there for 20 some odd picks before the Angels picked him.
Yeah, and he didn't have to go far to get to the studios, and maybe that was why, but it's cool that he was the first one because it's Mike Trout.
The August picks ended just a couple of years after they started it, but the January draft went until 1986. So there was just so much overload. And of course, in baseball, you have so many more players that are drafted. You have, up until recently, you had a lot of minor league teams. The system was just hard. And because that people aren't going to have that impact, it's not like looking, like you said, at the NFL, where we look to see which players coming out. And even with the NFL, it used to be if a quarterback was brought out, he normally was going to sit behind a more experienced quarterback, but that's not really the case anymore. These guys that are coming out, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray last year, his predecessor at Oklahoma there,
Baker Mayfield.
These guys all came out and had to go to a team and be an automatic starter. And that's not the way it is in baseball.
Well, and I think that too, going back, if you look at Kyler Murray, he also played baseball. And he was drafted, but he went with the NFL. And I think for the simple reason is he was going to play right away. He wasn't going to be in the minor leagues, even though he was a good ball player.
Probably thinking I made a good choice.
Yeah, at this point, yeah, he did.
As we just mentioned, the MLB draft has not been the event that the NFL or NBA drafts are, mostly because the players in those drafts are likely to have an immediate impact for the team drafting them. The top MLB picks generally take 3 to 5 years to get to the majors. There are only a few that have gone right to the majors and had success. Gil Hodges, Catfish Hunter, Al Kaline, Harmon Killebrew, George Sisler, Dave Winfield, and Sandy Koufax, just to name a few of those that went directly to the majors. Now, this year's draft is a little different. Well, let's be honest, it's a lot different than any draft before. The 2020 draft was only 5 rounds, and we know why. It was due to coronavirus and, of course, the poverty that the owners were crying. They claimed poverty. So they needed to cut it back because they didn't have money for a draft or anything. So we wondered what would have happened in all the past drafts were only 5 rounds.
You mentioned Nolan Ryan, whether he went in the 10th round or the 12th round, he wouldn't have gone this year if he had been a draftee. And
right, yeah. That's crazy to think that.
I know. I mean, it's also, he was inducted on his first try, no surprise, in 1999 into the Hall of Fame. It's interesting to me also that he went later rounds, but also that he never won a Cy Young Award. That's probably a different conversation, but it still surprises me every time I read that.
For all of the things that he's done and all the things you hear a lot of stuff. I mean, how many times did he take a no-hitter into the 7th inning? More than anybody else. How many times? So potentially he could have had 20 no-hitters.
Mm-hmm.
And even at 7, he seems untouchable.
He's but Nolan.
That's a whole different show as well. We could probably do a whole Nolan Ryan.
We might have to. We talk about him enough. But we love Nolan.
Well, if we do, let's see if maybe we can get him to come on the show. And
yeah,
that would be awesome.
What could he be doing? That would be awesome. Yeah.
No idea.
Ozzie Smith and Ricky Henderson, they were 4th round selections. If we're looking at when they were drafted to this year, they'd still be okay. Wade Boggs, 7th round, he would have been out.
Right.
Goose Gossage, 9th round.
Yeah, another one that wouldn't have been. Now, let's get to this point. Like with this year, with the shortened, there's the 5 rounds. At the end of the 5 rounds, anybody not drafted can sign as a UDFA, an undrafted free agent. This year, though, they have a cap of $20,000. That's all they can sign for. Whereas someone up in the top may sign for millions of dollars in a bonus, a signing bonus. These guys can be signed. So these players, we can always go back and say, well, these guys that wouldn't have been drafted in the, because they were drafted outside the 5th round could have signed with the team, but would they have? Saying, well, if I could have been drafted higher, or they're less likely to sign now, why not just go back to college? Or for the high school players, why not just go to college?
Right. And there are several of those in this year's draft also that we'll talk about later. Right. Jim Thome, he was drafted in the 13th round in 1989, and right. He is a Hall of Famer. He was
612 home runs worth of Hall of Famer right there.
Yeah, and his first year of eligibility in 2018, and he made it into the Hall of Fame, but he was the 13th round, the 333rd overall pick in the 1989 draft, selected by the Cleveland Indians.
So let's see. So far, Nolan Ryan, Wade Boggs, Rich Gossage, Jim Thome, all would not have been drafted.
And I have another one for you. Ryan Sandberg of the Cubs. Wow, he was a 20th round pick in 1978. He was selected by the Philadelphia Phillies. He appeared in just 13 games with the Phillies in his first big league season in 1981, and he recorded just 1 hit, which happened to be at Wrigley Field.
At Wrigley. He got his first hit where he spent his career.
Yes. And he was traded to the Chicago Cubs, and in 15 seasons, he was a 10-time All-Star, 9-time Gold Glove winner, and was the 1984 National League MVP. He was voted into the Hall of Fame on his 3rd try and inducted into in 2005. But he was the 20th round. So he's not even, if we looked at this year, he's not even a blip on a screen.
No, and he definitely would have gone on to do something else.
Right.
Probably.
How about John Smoltz? He was selected by the Detroit Tigers in the 22nd round, 1985.
That's crazy when you think about it, because he was not only a great starting pitcher, he revived and kept his career alive by moving to the bullpen and becoming a great relief pitcher.
Yeah, he's the only pitcher in MLB history to record at least 200 wins and 150 saves. And he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2015, his first year of eligibility. Now, he was selected by the Detroit Tigers, but he never played with the Tigers. He was traded to Atlanta in 1987 and played alongside Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine.
Yeah, they had a great pitching staff.
Yeah, they
for
did.
all those years. I wonder sometimes if the team's other general managers know that one team kind of covets a player, and so they'll select them before and then kind of hold them off to the side and go, hey, you want John Smoltz? I'll give you John Smoltz, but this is what I want in return.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I bet that goes into a lot of picks and how the different selections they make. All right, so for the last one that I have is Mike Piazza. He is the lowest pick in a Major League Baseball draft in history to make it to the Hall of Fame. He was drafted by the Los Angeles Dodgers in the 62nd round as the 1,390th pick of that draft.
As a favor, Tommy Lasorda did a favor to draft Piazza.
For his dad, yeah.
Right. And who would have thunk it? Piazza, I always look at Johnny Bench as probably the best catcher ever. But when you look at just numbers and everything, Piazza was a better catcher overall, numbers-wise, especially batting. He was a much better hitter.
Well, and he owes a lot to Tommy Lasorda. Not only was he drafted as a favor to Piazza's father that Tommy Lasorda and the Dodgers drafted him, but Piazza was a first baseman, and it was Tommy Lasorda that suggested he transition over to be a catcher. So it would be interesting to see if he had stayed at first base, would he even be in the Hall of Fame? Would he have the same numbers? Because obviously being behind the plate was a much better fit for him.
A lot of players that started off, when you look back, Pete Rose, who's obviously numbers-wise is a Hall of Famer.
And should be in the Hall of Fame.
He was drafted second baseman.
Yeah.
Played third base, played left field, played right field.
I think the only thing that would make Rob Manfred look a little better to me, and I say a little, is to put Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame. I think that could help his resume, because right now it's not looking so good. Pete needs to be in the Hall of Fame.
Even then, it's not going to look good. He finally will have done something right, but it's still not going to be.
Well, yeah, he could do that on the way out.
That would be,
like pardons.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It's like on the way out, I'm going to pardon these people. Talking about Hall of Famers that were low draft picks, in addition to the ones that we just talked about, Trevor Hoffman, who was a reliever for the Padres, Bruce Sutter, another great pitcher, and then the Hawk, Andre Dawson, is another one. All three of those were late round picks that went on to be Hall of Famers. And then one more who's not yet a Hall of Famer, but is on his way in as soon as his career is over, is Albert Pujols, 13th round draft pick. And yet you would think that he was a number one by the things that he's done, the way he played.
Yeah, all of his accomplishments, you would think he would be. But yeah, 13th round. It's amazing. But it just shows that those players that are taken in those later rounds, just because you're in that first round, it doesn't mean that you're going to make it. Baseball's a tough sport.
Yeah, when you look at it, it took years before a number one draft pick actually made the Hall of Fame, and still only 3 have so far. And when you look through the number one picks over the years, a lot of them that you don't even know who they are. And some of them, like we talked about with Rick Monday, is more noted for that one event than he is for his overall playing career. He was a solid player. But if you say Rick Monday to most casual fans, that's what they're going to remember him for more than, he played. Now, a lot of people don't even know that he was played in Kansas City, or that he was drafted by the Kansas City A's. Spent a lot of time with the Cubs. In fact, when he saved the flag at Dodger Stadium, he was playing for the Cubs. He wasn't a Dodger yet.
Yeah, he was on the opposing team when that happened. And if you're a Dodger fan, you listen to them on the radio. You also know Rick Monday as a really good radio announcer.
Yep, he does a good job there. Now, one more player that by this year could have actually worked out and signed, if he was willing to sign for the little bit of money that made the Hall of Fame, is Larry Walker. He was an undrafted free agent. He signed and he made his way and became a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he was in this year's class.
Yes.
So with his SpongeBob shirt, I remember when he was.
Exactly. We see just there in the history of the game having only 5 rounds. And next year, they're talking about it only maybe be going up to 20, which a lot of these guys that we talked about would make it. But John Smoltz is sitting on the sidelines looking in. So there's a lot of players have had a major impact on this game that we've all cheered for because they were great players, even if they weren't on our team.
Yeah, and think about Mike Piazza. What would he be doing today if it hadn't been for the connections that his dad had with Tommy?
Right.
It'd be interesting.
Sometimes that's all it is. You know what do they say? Just get your foot in the door. That is really Mike Piazza right there. He got his foot in the door and he made the most of it.
Definitely. He was the National League Rookie of the Year in 1993. So, yeah, getting that foot in the door made a huge difference for him.
So having just a 5-round draft or even just a 10-round draft would have had a major impact on these players. Now, how would it have all worked out? Would they have eventually been drafted? Because there's some players that when I look back through the time they were drafted, you could be drafted more than once. Say you could be drafted coming out of high school, and if you don't sign, you go to college. Well, they can't redraft you until after your sophomore year. So there are players that have been drafted, a couple of them maybe 3 times. But if we were here at only 5 rounds, and they wanted to go to 10 rounds, if you remember, but by not going to 10 rounds, I think it saved the owner somewhere like $30 million in the bonus pay.
Yeah, and the owners, they need all that money that they can get because they're on life support at this point.
I say it's time to pull that plug.
I think so too.
But as we see, we don't know what the history of baseball would look like if there had only been a shortened 5 rounds. Would these players, these 10, actually 11 players that we mentioned that were 12, well, we mentioned Albert Pujols. By mentioning those players that were drafted well past the 5th round, we don't know what would have ever happened. Maybe they would have been drafted higher after a couple more years somewhere else in college.
Or they became insurance salesmen.
Exact. That's my point. We don't know what they would have gone on to do. They could have become coaches at a university or a college or little league or whatever, and insurance salesman went off and did something else, took the business degree or public relations degree, and that was it. Baseball was over for them. There's a lot of names there that have had an impact on the game that would have not potentially made the major league if it was only a 5-round draft every year. The Dodgers and Angels have something in common for the 2020 draft. And with the exception of Mike Piazza, neither team has ever drafted a Hall of Famer yet. As I said, between the Dodgers and the Angels, the Dodgers drafted Mike Piazza, but Mike Piazza went into the Hall of Fame as a Met. Right now, between the Dodgers and the Angels, they've both got a player on their team that are projected to go into the Hall of Fame. One's closer to it than the other at this. Clayton Kershaw, who was a number 1 draft pick for the Dodgers, is probably going into the Hall of Fame.
I would agree with that.
The Angels' only draft pick that could make the Hall of Fame currently is Mike Trout. However, Mike Trout, even as good as he is now, if his career ended tomorrow, would he make the Hall of Fame? That's
a good question.
Now, the Angels do have one person in the Hall of Fame with an Angels hat, which they didn't have until Vladimir Guerrero went in as an Angel. So they are waiting on Mike Trout to be their first homegrown Hall of Famer.
I don't think that there's really a question about it. However, if Major League Baseball continues down the path that it's currently going down, then yeah, that could become a question that we would all want answered. We're definitely not seeing what he could be doing this season. But at this point, I think, yes, of course, Mike Trout. He has to go to the Hall of Fame.
Now, both the Dodgers and the Angels have had a pitcher go straight from the draft to the major leagues. Do you know who those two players are? And I'll give you a hint. They're both pitchers.
I'm going to see if I can call a friend because I don't know.
I don't think Planet Head can help you here.
Well, I think he's at a NASCAR game.
All right. Well, for the Dodgers, drafted in 1993, it's Darren Dreifert, who spent 9 years with the Dodgers. Remember Darren Dreifert?
I don't. I don't remember. I'm sorry, Darren. I don't remember you.
And then for the Angels, I know you remember who this guy is. He even went on to throw a no-hitter with the Yankees. I believe it was in 2004.
I know. I've seen him pitch at Angel Stadium. Jim Abbott.
That's correct. Jim Abbott went directly from the draft to the Angels. Of course, he played for the Yankees, the White Sox, and the Brewers. And he had about a 10-year career as well. So those are things that they have in common as far as their drafts. After that, they kind of go their own way. The Dodgers have definitely drafted better than the Angels. When you look at it, they've got Cody Bellinger, Corey Seager, Jock Peterson, Ross Stripling, Gavin Lux, Will Smith. These are all guys. Walker Buehler. These are all guys who were drafted by the Dodgers. When you look at the Angels, when you look at the mainstay of the players they have, David Fletcher, Griffin Canning, and Mike Trout. When you look at the rest of the Angels lineup, they all came from somewhere else. Andrelton Simmons was drafted by the Braves. Albert Pujols with the Cardinals. We've got a couple of guys that were with the Nationals, Anthony Rendon and Brian Goodwin. The Dodgers, like I said, for the most part, the Dodgers are a homegrown team. I mean, they do have, obviously, Mookie Betts was drafted by the Red Sox. David Price, the Tampa Bay Rays. Justin Turner. Who drafted Justin Turner? Do you know?
I should know this. I know he played with the Mets, but they're not the ones that drafted him, right?
Nope.
No.
He never played in the majors for the team that drafted him.
Oh, I know. The Orioles.
No, the team he was drafted by sent him to the Orioles. Then he went to the Mets. Then he came to the Dodgers. He was originally drafted by the Cincinnati Reds.
Oh, see, I missed that part.
And then Kike came from the enemy.
The Astros.
Yep.
Yeah. I know he's glad that he is not part of that crew.
And Austin Barnes, he was a Marlin.
He was a Marlin, yes.
As far as being drafted by. When you look at it, every team drafts better. When I look through to see the players that were drafted by, like the Dodgers, there were more players that ended up playing for the Dodgers, and there were some more some names that we know that were drafted by the Dodgers. Like, not that he was a good ball player, but we just talked about him last week. Bobby Valentine was drafted by the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And I wonder if in the Dodgers organization is where he got his disguise game from.
Maybe.
Rick Rhoden, who was a pitched for the Dodgers for a while, but then really made a bigger name for himself when he would pitch for the Pirates. Rick Sutcliffe really made his name with the Cubs. Mike Scioscia, Bob Welch in back-to-back years. And of course, both of those guys were on the 81 team. Steve Howe, who probably, had he not found that cocaine and other drugs were more fun than playing baseball, might have even been a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, never know. That's sad. He's a good pitcher.
When you look at it, I mean, they've drafted a lot of people that didn't really have great careers, but they drafted players that went on to help them win, like Dave Anderson and Franklin Stubbs were both on the 88 series team. Glenn Davis, who went off to be a better player with other teams. Clayton Kershaw. Those are all players that are having some sort of an impact. So they drafted a lot better than the Angels. So it seems, because when you look at what the Angels have done, a lot of their players went off somewhere else or didn't really have any kind of career. Frank Tanana was a great pitcher for the Angels, especially teamed up with Nolan Ryan during the 70s. Dave Chalk was a guy who came in and played third base and was a part of the Angels, but not a great player. He was middle of the road. Ken Landreau is a name that stands out to me, but not because of the Angels, but because he spent 7 years with the Dodgers. It takes a while when you look through. They had some guys, Dick Schofield, who came in and played shortstop for him for quite a few years. Some other names of guys that these are all first rounders, but it's not till you get to like Jim Abbott that had a solid career. Darren Erstad, Troy Gloss, both solid careers. They're filled with, the Angels are filled with a lot of guys who had promise, but never really fulfilled. Jared Weaver did have a pretty good career, was a lifelong Angel with the exception of the short time he played in San Diego. Then, of course, Mike Trout, Tyler Skaggs, who should have had a great career, could have had a great career. Gone. And then right now, the biggest name, Joe Adele, who we're waiting to see when he might find his way to the major league. I think the Dodgers have drafted better throughout the years. And that's one thing that we can say about Friedman is he's got an idea and he goes with it, and he's done very well drafting for the Dodgers.
Totally agree. And this year's draft, we've got with the Dodgers, Bobby Miller was the first round draft pick for the Dodgers. He was the 29th pick of the first round. He's one of those guys that you were talking about earlier that had been drafted before. He was actually drafted out of high school by the Baltimore Orioles in the 38th round in the 2017 draft, but he didn't sign, and instead he went to the University of Louisville and did really well there. As a freshman, he was 6-1 with a 2.97 ERA, and he was an All-American with the American Athletic Conference. He made the All-Freshman team. As a junior in this 2020 shortened season that college baseball played, he went 2-0 with a 2.31 ERA over 4 starts, striking out 34 over 23 and a third innings before the season was cut short because of COVID. But one of the things that I've heard, he's got really good numbers. He's a good pitcher, but tweets and other things on social media, like, wow, all right, we're excited that Bobby Miller's a Dodger, and he's going to be an even better pitcher because he's going to be one of those homegrown Dodgers. That's what they're hoping for.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I think they need to do is teach him how to wear a hat. Although he wears his hat a lot like Cody Bellinger.
He does. Yeah, that is one thing. I love Cody Bellinger, but yeah,
his hat game
whenever I see him, I gotta no. Like, put your hat on right.
Now, what I did hear, they sent a bunch of hats out. This was the other thing that was the Dodgers and Angels had in common this year as far as drafts goes. Their number one picks were both pitchers from Louisville. And apparently the hats all fit the Angels pick, his hat size, but it was too small of a hat size for Bobby. So it was a little hard on there. So
unfortunate.
And I thought that was the case, but then I went back and saw pictures of him pitching with his Louisville hat on, and it looked the same. So either he likes to wear his hats small, or he pitches so well I don't ever notice how he wears his hat. Like Cody plays so well, I forget about how he wears his hat.
Second round draft pick for the Dodgers. He's an interesting guy. His name's Landon Knack. He's a pitcher from East Tennessee State, and he was not drafted. He was not selected in the 2019 draft. And he says that by not being selected in last year's draft, that really motivated him to up his game and to be even better. So in his first 4 starts of this season, he posted a 1.08 ERA. His last start was March 7th. He pitched 6 scoreless innings and he struck out 16. So he's an exciting addition, I think, for the Dodgers to their roster. Third round was Jake Vogel. The Dodgers picked him. He is a senior in high school, or he's graduated, but he's from Huntington Beach High School in Huntington Beach, California. Now, he has committed to playing for UCLA, but he's really fast. He has a 350 batting average with 12 home runs, 12 triples, and 22 doubles in 74 varsity games in high school. He scored 59 runs, had 43 runs batted in, and reeled off 31 stolen bases. So will he decide to play for UCLA, or will he go straight and play in the minors for the Dodgers and hopefully make it to the big leagues? So that will be a question for him. Fourth round is Carson Taylor. He's a catcher from Virginia Tech. He was on the bubble because of the rounds being shortened from 40 to 5. According to Baseball America, he was the number 218th ranked prospect, and there were only 160 players selected this year. So he's another one that kind of slid in under the radar. But he said that if he wasn't drafted, he was going to go back to school and next season. He's only a sophomore, but he was eligible for the draft because he turned 21 in May. I'm sure he's happy to be a Dodger. Fifth round for the Dodgers is a guy by the name of Gavin Stone, pitched at Central Arkansas. 4 starts in his junior season. He produced a 1.30 ERA and the third no-hitter in school history. His strikeout rate, 31%, and walk rate at 6% were in line with his sophomore year, but he did pitch out of the bullpen in 18 of his 20 games last year. And the one pick that the Dodgers had, and what's it called that you passed out? And
the competitive balance pick, which would have happened at the end of the second round, because competitive balance A happened at the end of the first round. Competitive balance B happened at the end of the second round.
Yeah, so this guy was in the competitive balance B, and his name is Clayton Beeter.
They got that pick from Minnesota in the Kenta Maeda trade.
Right. Clayton Beeter, he's a pitcher, also played with Texas Tech, the Red Raiders. This season, he was 2-1 with a 2.14 ERA. So another pitcher for the Dodgers. He has already had Tommy John surgery, so hopefully that will not be a reoccurrence.
Now wait a minute.
But that is something I noted.
He can't be a Dodger. If he's had Tommy John surgery, that automatically makes him an Angel.
Well, that's what I thought too, but he is a Dodger in that competitive balance round B pick. Overall, good picks for the Dodgers. Got 3 pitchers, a catcher, and then the outfielder in Jake Vogel. But again, it will be interesting to see if he does sign with the Dodgers, or does he continue his career, the collegiate level, with UCLA.
Yeah, it sounded like they overall had a pretty good draft. We'll see, obviously. If I'm Carson Taylor, I'm not sure how I feel about being another catcher in the system with Will Smith just now coming up and taking that spot, and then Keeper Ruiz.
Yeah.
And obviously he could come out and end up being better than both of them. But that's always the thing. I think a lot of times, players don't want to go play for a certain team in any league because they don't want to sit behind somebody else. And when you look at some of them, if you're a center fielder in the Angels organization, you're thinking, I really don't, so do you go learn how to play another position? And that's kind of happening because Joe Adell, they've been teaching him how to play right field because he was drafted as a center fielder. He's played center field, but if he's going to come up and have any type of an impact on the team, be part of the team, he's got to move. And that's a lot of the reason why they moved Cole Calhoun out and didn't re-sign him even for a lesser amount, because they wanted to make room for Joe Adele when he was ready to come up. So that's the one thing, some of these guys, will they, like you said, will they go off to play for UCLA and take his chance in a couple of more years when he's 21 or when he graduates from college and take his chance then with a different team or maybe even the Dodgers again?
Well, too, and you mentioned when we were talking about history of the draft is how many of these guys, that were drafted, obviously even I can't even say obviously, because in the first 5 rounds, how many will stay? How many will be potentially, traded? That will be interesting to see, especially because we only had the 5 rounds. Will they all stay within their organizations that they were drafted?
You never know. You might get there, might be even a number 1 pick and get traded off to a different system just simply because that's what works for the organization.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think with the baseball draft, it's happened, in years past. It's like, yeah, you kind of listen, I guess, for the first round. But then after that, because it's so many rounds, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a good haul for my team. But this year, because it is, the shortened 5 rounds, will fans be more apt to kind of follow these guys to see where they end up? And of course, because we haven't had baseball, but we did have a draft, it was somewhat exciting for the fans, I think, because there was at least movement happening with new players coming on board.
The one thing that I need to point out is that the Dodgers picked 29th, and while normally there would be 30 picks in the first round, the Dodgers and Bobby Miller, he was the very last pick of the first round at number 29.
Yes.
And you wonder, what happened to number 30? And then you realize that would have been the Houston Astros pick that they lost because they're cheaters. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there.
No, that needs to be mentioned all the time.
Wasn't that really the only thing that was their real punishment, was that they lost their first round pick, first and second?
Ooh. Yeah, pretty much. It's not even a slap on the wrist. That's like You go to timeout, but your mom's not paying attention, and so you still are playing. But then when mom walks in the room, you're back in the timeout.
I don't know how that timeout stuff works. They didn't have that when I was a kid. It was in a corner or there was a whooping, something. But there was no timeouts.
Well, the Astros definitely deserve a whooping.
Yeah, they need to be. What did Bill Engvall say? That kid doesn't need a timeout. He needs a knockout.
That's right.
Well, the Angels had a pretty decent overall draft. They only had 4 picks versus the Dodgers. They had their 5 and then the 6th with the competitive balance pick. The Angels had to give up a pick as compensation for signing Anthony Rendon. It was a second round pick. I mean, they may have gotten somebody. We'll never know. I guess we could look and see who the Nationals took with their pick and see what happens with them. But that may not have been who the Angels picked. One thing I kept hearing over and over is from all of the experts during the draft, always pick the best available. Doesn't matter what you need, pick the best available, because what you need now, not 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. In this case, the Angels actually may have picked somebody that they needed and may be close to coming in now. Al Leiter on MLB Network said after this pick that he thought that Reed Detmers, picked at number 10 by the Angels, also from the University of Louisville, could be in the majors next year.
I would agree with that. His numbers are really good. And if you've seen him pitch, it's fun to watch.
Yeah, he's got some killer pitches. His curveball is incredible. And he's not a speed guy. His fastball lives in the low 90s, which for a lot of players, that's like, okay, now I'm declining. But he's got a different way of pitching. It's more about where he puts the ball, less about how fast it gets there. He's got that Greg Maddux feel to him as far as his idea of pitching. That was what always made Greg Maddux. Greg Maddux could strike you out on a 75-mile-an-hour fastball because his changeup only went 50. That was the thing. He's more of a tactician in how he pitches versus being an overpowering type pitcher. There were a couple other pitchers that went before him that were those guys. And even Bobby Miller is more of a power pitcher, can throw up around 100. That's not Reed Detmer.
And for the Angels, definitely a good pick, since you guys they need help in the pitching department. And so Reed Detmer's good selection for the Angels. He's the 5th Louisville player in the last 5 years to be selected in the first round.
That was the two things. I kept hearing Louisville and I kept hearing Vanderbilt. Those were the teams that seemed to be putting out the most talent these years.
Well, and you look too with Vanderbilt, Walker Buehler, and David Price went to Vanderbilt also.
Yes.
So good baseball programs there at Louisville.
And Vandy.
Yes. So I was excited for the Angels when I saw this, their first round pick, because pitching, we've talked about it several times on the show, how one thing that always sticks out for the Angels is pitching.
In the 3rd round, they picked up a guy named David Calabrese out of St. Elizabeth High School as an outfielder, compared a lot to Jacoby Ellsbury. He's a good runner. He's got good defense in center field. He's short to the ball with a good approach. Stays back, makes more contact, but that cost him some power.
He's committed to play ball at Arkansas, so he's another one. Will he sign with the Angels, or will he continue on and play for the Razorbacks?
In their 4th round pick, they picked another high schooler, Warner Blakely, who's a shortstop. Not a bad idea to pick it up shortstops. Andrelton Simmons still has time to play, but he's moving towards the end of his career. And we don't know if after this season, if they'll be re-signed. Having the best possible players on the way up, because you never know when somebody's going to be injured. That's how David Fletcher got a lot of playing time. Luis Rengifo got a lot of playing time because Tommy LaStella went out. Andrelton Simmons was out. Warner Blakely out of Detroit Edison High School was their 4th round pick. He's a shortstop. He hit .467 with 10 doubles, 6 triples, 4 home runs, 34 RBIs, and 24 stolen bases during his junior year in 2019. He is committed to go to Auburn. He is the first player from Detroit to take part in the Under Armour All-American game at Wrigley Field, and he started the game at shortstop. And then finally in the 5th round, the Angels grabbed another pitcher, local kid out of Long Beach State, Adam Seminaris. He's a lefty, pitched 3 seasons there at Long Beach State, appeared in 40 games, 27 of those he started. His ERA is pretty normal for these days. He's not like Reed with a 2.78 or this season a 1.23. He's more at a 3.58. But these days, anything under a 4 or sometimes even a 5 seems to be okay. 154 strikeouts and 173 and 2/3 innings. He played in the Cape Cod League last summer, and 30 1/3 innings, a 3.26 ERA, struck out 21. He's another one of those that maybe, I don't know how much work he really needs, but I'm hearing good things, especially locally, and maybe being close to home will help him. We'll see what happens. He was off to a really good start this season. Through 22 innings, allowed only 3 runs, had a 1.23 ERA, and he struck out 36 in 22 innings, issued only 3 walks. So when you look at the 2020 seasons of the 2 pitchers the Angels picked, both of them had the same ERA. Both of them had a really good strikeout to walks ratio. So they overall they did pretty well. Obviously, as we know, this is the game of what ifs, but it seems like they're both the Dodgers and the Angels are on track to have some pretty decent talent coming up in the years to come. And with the pitching for the Angels, hopefully they're going to come together quickly and find their way and really help out the team so we have a solid base and no more Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, you got to get that out of there. I do have one thing that I've been thinking about. So originally, the draft was going to coincide with the College World Series. And of course, the College World Series was canceled this year. And I wonder, I don't know that it would have had that much of an impact, but, and also, I guess, too, it maybe because it would have been a normal draft if the College World Series was played. Would these guys have gone where they went if they had had a full season playing college ball or high school, or if their team was in the College World Series and they didn't do well, would their number go down? There's lots of different questions, I think, that go along with this draft this year because we only had 5 rounds, shortened college and high school seasons, sports seasons for the spring. But congratulations to all these guys for being drafted, because it's not often that you can say you were signed by the Los Angeles Dodgers or Los Angeles Angels.
Have you ever thought a story you heard was completely fiction, only later to find out it was a true story, or at least based on a true story? We have one of those this week.
So this happened on June 15th, 1949. Shortly after 1 a.m., Ruth Ann Steinhagen shoots Eddie Waitkiss in the chest with a rifle at Chicago's Edgewater Beach Hotel after luring him to her room with an urgent note delivered by the bellhop. The obsessed fan, who had become infatuated with the first baseman when he played in Chicago, apparently is upset and agitated because the Cubs traded the all-star infielder to the Phillies.
Now, who's Eddie Waitkiss? Eddie Waitkiss was an 11-year major leaguer. He hit .285 over his lifetime. Didn't have a lot of power. He hit 24 home runs in 11 seasons. Born in Massachusetts, attended Boston College, signed in 1939 as a free agent. Of course, there were no drafts then, as we've now learned. He also played in 1942 for the Los Angeles Angels back when they were with the Pacific Coast League. And he led the PCL in hits that season. Then the war intervened. And much like last week's subject, Calvin Abrams, went off to war. He won in World War II, won 4 battle stars. He was wounded. By 1946, he was back and became a Cubs regular at first base,
where writers called him the Fred Astaire of first baseman. Yeah, he was an interesting guy. Ted Williams called his swing one of the best swings he'd ever seen. Off the field, Waitkiss spoke 4 languages. He was a Civil War historian. He loved ballroom dancing. He was just not your typical blue-collar baseball player.
So that's who Eddie Waitkiss was. But now back to what happened to him. Shot by Ruth Ann Steinhagen. It took several operations to remove the bullet. And in most cases, you would think he's done. But no, he worked hard and made it back to baseball and became a key member of the Phillies' 1950 Whiz Kids team. Hit .267 in the 1950 World Series, batting in the leadoff spot right ahead of Richie Ashburn. And in that 1950 season, he was named the Associated Press's Comeback Player of the Year.
Yeah, he didn't don a Phillies uniform for the remainder of that 1949 season. The year that he was shot. But on August 19th, the Phillies sponsored an Eddie Waitkiss night during which the ball player had gift upon gift upon gift because of his amazing recovery from something that you would think would be a career ender for any ball player.
Prior to the 1954 season, the Baltimore Orioles purchased Waitkiss from the Phillies for about $40,000. Released by the Orioles in 1955, he returned to the Phillies for the remainder of the season. And at the end of the 1955 season, the Phillies released Eddie Waitkiss. After Eddie's career, he taught at the Ted Williams baseball camp. And then on September 16th, 1972, in Massachusetts, he died of esophageal cancer. He was 53 years old.
And while he went on after the shooting to have a good career, despite the injury that he had, he suffered after his retirement from baseball. And then several years, probably 5 or 6 years later, he split from his wife. And he suffered post-traumatic stress disorder because of the shooting, is what the doctors said, which totally makes sense. I mean, he went on and played baseball and was married and had kids. But I guess in the end, I mean, he had esophageal cancer, but his choices that he made at the end of his life were all based, I didn't say based, but a lot of things that happened go back to that night in 1949 when he was shot by a woman, a teenager, really. She was 19 years old. She was obsessed with him to the point that she had a shrine of cut, newspaper clippings in her room dedicated to him. And her mother said she always had a place for him at the family dinner table. So when he was traded to the Phillies, she felt like he had abandoned her, even though he didn't even know her and she didn't know him.
And it wasn't his choice to be traded to the Phillies necessarily. So
no.
And imagine the surprise he must have had, because she used an alias of an old high school classmate and sent the message to him as that classmate. He goes there thinking he's going to see that person and instead gets shot.
Yeah, it's quite the story.
You're probably wondering, where are we going with this? The minute that we saw the story, we thought, wait a minute, that's The Natural. That's the movie. And while that particular part of the story was admittedly by the man who wrote the book, the inspiration for the beginning of the story, if you've seen The Natural, you know what happens with Roy Hobbs. And it's changed out a little bit, but you know what the deal is. The rest of the book is more connected towards the gambling effects and connected more to Shoeless Joe Jackson as far as like the inspiration. So for all this time, I thought that The Natural was just a fictional movie. It turns out it does have a basis in fact. And now we know that this was actual baseball history and not just baseball lore.
And to wrap it up, we have one more baseball history that happened this week in 1955. Back in 1955, players didn't have water coolers to kick around. Instead, there were water fountains in the dugout. So after striking out against the Amarillo Gold Sox, 22-year-old Albuquerque Dukes outfielder Larry Segovia kicks a water fountain in the dugout, breaking a pipe that creates a 50-foot high cascade of water which soaks his teammates and nearby fans. The West Texas-New Mexico League contest will be delayed as the grounds crew shuts off the water, repairs the damages, and removes the puddles from the playing field. Very wet affair in Amarillo.
He was looking for a rain out.
Yeah, he created one, that's for sure. This story is included in a book that I have on my bookshelf that I want to read. It was one of the ones that I want to read, called Bush League Boys, The Post-War Legends of Baseball in the American Southwest by Toby Smith. And it's all about the West Texas New Mexico League and the stories that happened, and kind of a forgotten era because they played after World War II. So some fun stories, interesting stories, like Larry Segovia of the Albuquerque Dukes creating his own rainout when he struck out.
And that'll do it for this week's Sibling Rivalry Baseball podcast.
Remember, you can find us on our website, siblingrivalrybb.com, and on Facebook and Instagram at Sibling Rivalry BB.
We're also on Twitter at Sibling Rivalry BB without the A. Email us, show@siblingrivalrybb.com. We'd love to hear what you think, so subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to our podcast.
Join us next week as we dust off our abacus to determine if 48 games is an actual season.
And we wonder if Josh Fields would be a good baseball commissioner.
You're out!